My name is Chris Jarvis. I'm on the negative side of euthanasia, and I'm rebuttaling against what Nestor claimed for the affirmative side of it. The first thing Nestor brought up was that he said that he defined euthanasia and he expressed how it's in other countries and made it sound like it's already in effect and is doing a pretty good job. My thing is that euthanasia is different from what he was talking about, which is physician-assisted suicide, which is what is legal. And physician-assisted suicide is where you go to a physician and he gives you a prescription, and the prescription would kill you. So it's not actually the doctor killing you, it's that they're giving you a prescription for you to kill yourself. My main thing with that is that if physician-assisted suicide is legalized throughout the United States, that it'll only lead to more acts of euthanasia and only lead to more cases of euthanasia being legalized. The first is a quote from care.org, and they actually say, there is no right to be killed and there are real dangers to the slippery slope. Opening the doors to voluntary euthanasia could lead to non-voluntary and involuntary euthanasia, and by doing this would give the power to doctors to decide on people who would live and die. So essentially it would open kind of the gateway for more euthanasia acts to proceed. So first it'd start with physician-assisted suicide, then it'd go up to euthanasia, where doctors are actually allowed to kill you in there, and then it escalate until it got to a point where it wouldn't even be your say. The doctor could just say, we'll just kill him off because it's easier for whatever reason. And the second claim is actually a quote from NHS.uk, where they also argue the slippery slope could escalate to be a government thing, where the government could actually issue out statements and say things such as people, terminally ill patients at the age of this age by law are to be killed through euthanasia. And any government that starts killing its own citizens is not a government at all. So the third part of that is that this would also give the power to doctors to decide what is normal and healthy, and then decide based on that who should live and who should die. And I have a quote from License to Kill, which is a medical journal from UK medical students. And it says, the legalization of euthanasia and PAS makes the underlying assumption that the worth of human life depends on features such as physical and mental abilities rather than being valuable in itself. So instead of life being valuable to everyone, it will be based on whether we're physically healthy or whether we're mentally healthy, and that just isn't the kind of society we want. So the second part of his argument, he went into how patients suffer patients are suffering because they're terminally ill, and if they're suffering, it's just easier to use euthanasia. That's actually my first claim against that is that it's actually a fallacy that terminally ill patients are suffering. That would be easier to have euthanasia than take medication. A quote from usccb.org, it says, in fact, the chief argument that assisted suicide is the need to avoid excruciating pain and suffering that many accompany on terminally ill patients is based on a fallacy. Advances in pain medication now make it possible to control pain effectively in dying patients. Only rarely is it necessary to induce sleep to relieve pain or distress in the final stage of dying. This was a quote from 2013, so it was just last year, so that's pretty recent. So the fact that medication has gone that far, it's more valuable than euthanasia. So the second part is that laws against euthanasia do not exist to make people suffer. So a lot of people think that, people are suffering, that's why it should be a law, so that people don't suffer. Well, from a quote from Rita Marker, who's actually the executive director of the International Task Force on Euthanasia, her whole purpose is to study it, she said that this claim would be similar to saying that laws against selling contaminated food are mandating starvation. Laws against euthanasia and assisted suicide are in place to prevent abuse and to protect people from unscrupulous doctors and others. They are not and never have been intended to make anyone suffer. So that is for that. And the third part of that is that physician-assisted suicide is not as painless as one may think. And from Greenwood, from an article about physician-assisted suicide from Greenwood JH, It actually says in a Dutch study, 3 to 16% of patients who had either euthanasia or assisted suicide had complications such as failure of compilation, miscrucilis, or vomiting. So it's actually very suffering sometimes. If euthanasia goes wrong, it can actually be even more suffering than if you were to take the appropriate actions. So the last thing that he discussed is he said euthanasia would benefit society, and that actually would benefit the in-hospital environment. I would actually argue that euthanasia destroys the relationship between doctors and patients. And the first example of this I have is that is actually from another medical journal, from the Physician-Assisted Suicide. It was a medical article by Lois Sander, and she says many patients do not have a long-standing relationship with a physician who know them well. An obvious prerequisite of any meaningful discussion of voluntary informative choice about assistance with suicide. So the fact that they don't have a relationship with this doctor is already kind of like enough, like, well, why would you look out for me? And it kind of sets up that kind of situation. And that if there was if there's a strong relationship, the idea that you would want to be killed instead of having the doctor help you through it as less painful as possible would actually cause this to be less of a thing. And then another one from License to Kill, which is the medical journal from the UK students. It says, when faced with a patient saying that life is not living, medical students are taught to acknowledge the patient's distress and to make an effort to address the factors underlying these feelings. If euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide were legalized, then an alternative approach becomes possible. So instead of trying to comfort the patients and all that, they would have to be taught something different. And that kind of creates a distrust with you and your doctor. And that leads me into my last point about that, which is another quote from nhs.uk, which is saying, causing death on a regular basis can become a routine and administrative task for doctors, leading to a lack of compensation when dealing with elderly, disabled, and terminally ill people. In turn, people with complex health need to serve or severe disabilities could become distrustful of their doctor's efforts and intentions. They may think that their doctors would rather kill them off than take care of responsibility in complex care. So if you can't trust your own doctors, whether it's someone you've known since you were 2, I mean, what does that say about our medical care? Thank you.